Hey, welcome back to Assistive Insight. And today we are going to be talking with Candace about
Hi.
Lyme disease. So, how are you today, Candace?
Um, Today in general, uh, it's good. I mean, this at this point in my life, I'm kind of reintegrating back into society after 5 years of being
Hmm.
bedbound. So I take every day to day. Um, and Yeah, today, I mean, this past weekend has been pretty good physically, but I'm still dealing with some of the social fallout of being bedbound for 5 years and trying to
Hmm.
reintegrate to society. And so last night I had something socially kind of sad. I kind of like lost a friend.
Oh,
So I'm a little bit sad about that today, but those are kind of typical repercussions from being sick that long.
is that was it just Lyme disease that made you bedbound for that long?
Yeah, it was Lyme disease. What we eventually discovered 4 years later was it was Lyme disease, but it was neurological Lyme. So
Oh, okay, I see.
my central nervous system was very inflamed. And then I also had Babesia, Bartonella,
Oh,
and anaplasmosis, which are all under the umbrella of Lyme.
okay.
So they're all from one tick bite, but they're all considered different diseases and they all manifest in different ways. So I got a really nasty, just a really bad tick where it just had a lot of different things in it. So I was very, very active when I got sick. I was 24. I was a fitness instructor.
Hmm.
I loved traveling. I loved music festivals and EDM music festivals, electronic dance music, which are
Yeah,
high intensity.
right.
It's for, you can't be unhealthy to go to those. So
Yeah,
I was really in the best health of my life. And the way Lyme happened for me, it hit me like a bus. Like some people who have Lyme, it is a slow creep up and it's from a latent infection a couple of years ago.
hmm,
Mine, I went to a music festival, I was camping. Our greatest, we don't know for sure how I got it, but our suspicion is I got it at that festival because the symptoms hit immediately
I
afterwards.
see.
And yeah, so the exhaustion was immediately so bad, and I had those flu-like symptoms and everything, and I was working a day job and a night job to try to pay off loans, and
Mhm.
immediately had to quit the night job. I just would get home from my day job and be like, I feel like I physically can't stand up. Like shot with exhaustion.
Yeah,
So it's a level of exhaustion that I've never experienced as a healthy person. You can get
right.
exhausted as a healthy person. It's such a different level.
Yeah.
Um, and for the first 6 months, I was told I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I saw about 20 doctors and no one diagnosed me with Lyme disease. Now, chronic fatigue syndrome, from thinking that I had it, I thought I had it for a year and a half. I was misdiagnosed for a year and a half, is
Okay.
a very severe and real disease.
Yeah.
It's actually called myalgic encephalomyelitis in the community
Okay.
because chronic fatigue syndrome has such a bad connotation to it,
Connotation. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and it makes people think that people are not severely suffering. So I definitely don't. It's sad because a lot of people with Lyme disease are misdiagnosed with it, but I don't want to
Hmm.
dismiss it as, oh, they didn't take me seriously. This was a
Right.
different
Yeah.
disease I was diagnosed with. And it was a year and a half later from talking to people online and crowdsourcing and being like, what do I do for chronic fatigue syndrome? Should I try to get on antiviral? So should I see this doctor? Has anyone and people were saying back to me, you need to double check with a Lyme literate doctor,
I see.
just to be sure. And I went to see a Lyme literate doctor before I was working in the medical system,
Hmm.
and a lot of the testing is inaccurate.
Okay.
Um, and the Lyme literate doctor, even though I initially got false negatives, with the regular system, was like, I believe you have it. Let's start the treatment.
Okay.
And I was already severely bedbound at that point from it spreading all over my body. Um, and then I was bedbound for another about 2 years. The last year was me coming in and out of it.
Hmm.
The first year on antibiotics was just like absolute brutal hell. I was still bedbound and I was getting sicker on them. That's how they work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you get sicker before you get better. And then yeah, so I would say like my second year working with my Lyme literate doctor, towards the end, it really was 2 years probably being bedbound even with her.
Hmm.
I started to shift out of that. And then I would say the last couple years, things have really turned
Have gotten
around
better, yeah.
to an oxygen treatment that I did last spring. Yeah. So
Okay. So, with
sorry.
oxygen treatment, like, did Lyme like affect your oxygen supply? Like, is that what you're saying with oxygen treatment?
So there's a treatment called hyperbaric oxygen treatment, and so it's one of those alternative treatments for Lyme that some people have heard about, but most people haven't. I can actually show you. I have it in my room.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can flip the camera. Yes, I can. So this is I get into this every day. I ended up buying one, a mild version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Here, let me take my laundry out of the way. So yeah, it's basically you go inside, and this is kind of, you can't really tell without it blown up, but this is the oxygen tank, and then you put an oxygen mask on yourself inside. So this is the oxygen mask. So like every Lyme treatment, it kind of affects people differently. But from what I've heard, most people have pretty significant turnarounds, which is why I did it, and it did
Yeah.
have one for me. It was a hard treatment to, I mean, I was exhausted and just kind of pushing myself through it.
Yeah.
So
So how long
yeah.
did you have to continue this treatment?
The standard, what they say for Lyme from the small amount of studies, they say to do at least 40 hours. Um, and to do it at a pressure of, this wouldn't make sense to a regular person, but 2.4 ATA is just a high pressure. That's the pressure that kills Lyme.
Okay.
So they suggest the best is to do an hour and a half, 40 days in a row. But I've tried different things. I did an hour and a half twice a day at the end of the treatment. I went beyond 40 sessions. I ended up doing 80 sessions, and that's because they say 40 kind of minimum, and I had a
Yeah.
severe case, and I just always suspected that, let me do that second kind
Right.
of round of 40 to
Yeah.
really kick it. And I think that was a good decision.
Yeah, it's
I'm
good
really
because
done.
yeah, you said you're like in remission now, right? So you're
So
completely free of it?
no, I wouldn't say I'm in remission, but I'm very close to remission.
Okay.
I would say I'm 1 or 2 years away, which for, again,
Good.
an average person is like, what? That's not even close to remission.
Yeah.
But as someone who's been sick for over 5 years,
Yeah.
and at the beginning, doctors just said, you're
Good.
probably going to be sick like this for the rest of your
Yeah.
life.
Good luck.
There's nothing, there's all your information is normal, like all your testing is normal. And I spent, the first 2 years, I would pray before I go to bed that I wouldn't die in my sleep. That's how much I was so weak. I could barely breathe. My heart was like racing out of my chest. I would have, the room would be like ice cold in the winter, and I'd have both windows open and an AC pumping, and I would be in a tank top and shorts just sweating hot, like I couldn't, and then in the summer I just thought I was going to die. But there was a good 2 to 3 years where, like, I would pray that I would wake up. My mom was afraid she would wake up to a dead daughter pretty much for 2 to 3 years straight, and my father said a Hail Mary every night that I wouldn't. I went from a extremely high functioning, high energy person to almost comatose, like unable to do anything. So from that point of view, the fact that I'm even
Yeah.
within 10 years, years away from remission is miraculous.
Yeah,
Like, it is
absolutely. Yeah.
really like a miracle story that I was able to beat it with how severely sick I
Yeah.
was. My parents had to feed me at some points because I couldn't pick up my arm. I mean, truly very little hope for recovery. And where I am now is I go out with my friends a few times a week, or I'll go on dates, like a normal social
Yeah.
life. I don't work a full-time job, but I do part-time jobs that
Yeah.
are to manage right now. I'm applying to be a substitute teacher as a transition job.
Yeah.
That would allow me to pick the days that I can come in on days that I
Mhm.
don't feel well. I don't, it's just a matter of deciding whether or not you want to cover a class that day.
Yeah.
So all of these things were an impossibility, just an impossible thought when I was that sick.
Mhm.
Being able to drive now, I couldn't drive at all. I can drive now. I can walk. That was the other thing. I lost the ability to walk.
Yeah,
I
it's
developed
wheelchair.
peripheral neuropathy,
Mhm.
and right now we found a system that is helping me day to day. It hasn't gotten at the root cause of it because if I stop using the machine,
Yeah.
the pain and the weakness comes back. But as someone who seriously contemplated being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, I'm like, again, 2 hours of doing peripheral neuropathy leg treatment, which includes red light therapy on my legs, and then a program called a rebuilder that sends electric current through my legs to re-stimulate my nerves.
Okay.
I can now walk like 12,000 a day, 12,000 steps a day.
Oh, that's
And,
amazing. Yeah.
that's, that is insane from going from
Yeah.
a wheelchair to that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like
So
like a management thing rather than just kind of getting to the root of it. But I mean, it's working.
ex- absolutely. That's where I'm
Yeah.
kind of at, where I found how to manage my disease very well. The oxygen chamber helps enormously
Mm.
with the energy.
Right.
This leg stuff helps with the leg disability. And then in terms of neurological clarity, that's the other big issue that I have problems with. A
Yeah.
very bizarre thing that we discovered was that if I take an alprazolam, which is a Xanax,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
um, it causes all my neurological symptoms to calm down and I can think clearly. So, the theory behind why this is working is that because I have neurological Lyme disease and my central nervous system is inflamed,
Hmm.
because alprazolam and Xanax suppresses the central nervous system, perhaps it's suppressing the part of my body that's inflamed that's causing all of
Yeah.
this.
Like, has it been just kind of like, was that like kind of hit and miss? Hit like just if something worked, it worked. And if it didn't, we just kept experimenting till something worked.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of it has been experimentation. My Lyme literate doctor, she is an ND. She doesn't work in the medical system with insurance
Mhm.
and everything, and she's willing to take more risks. She's not. That's and she talks to me for an hour, so she's very open to trying different things or listening to my response. Oh, this thing's weirdly have this effect on me, should we try
Right.
this,
Mhm.
and so she's awesome in that way. But I would say at the beginning of it I was following a pretty standard protocol. She was just putting me on antibiotics when I was bedbound. She was just like, we're getting you on antibiotics and then herbs, and that was a pretty typical protocols. She was switching the antibiotics a lot, so that my body wouldn't become resistant to them. But it wasn't until I got to that place of being able to do the oxygen therapy, and then I kind of shot up to like a place of somewhat, functioning society,
Yeah.
that we really started to experiment with different things, because it wasn't when I was that sick, taking a bigger risk, it could have led to disaster.
Yeah.
So once my body was stable enough to start to try a couple things out here and there, um
Took that
yeah,
chance,
that's
right?
it, and that's, yeah, pretty much. It's both my doctors and me just looking up things and being like, "Hey, can we try this?" And some things hit
Mhm.
and some things miss. Yeah, it really is kind of comes down to that.
Yeah. So, during this period when you mentioned like you had to reach like a certain level before you started trying to experiment more, was there like um I don't want to make it too personal for you, but like was there a lot of like times where you thought maybe like I'm really scared, like I don't want to do this or I don't think this is going to end well or like yeah. Do you mind talking a
Love
little?
that you call that like a personal question when that's like the universal chronic illness experience. Like,
Yeah, but I don't want to
yeah,
like, you know.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I mean, terrified for my life,
Hmm.
terrified. I mean, a fear I've never experienced for pretty much 3 years. Those 3 years that I thought I might die in my sleep because I felt that sick, the fear, I mean, is overwhelming, and you have to sleep. So I would have to fall asleep. Unfortunately, I'm still dealing with that subconsciously, even though I feel safe falling asleep. Um, I've developed really, it's hard for me to get asleep due to that
Yeah.
old mindset. So, and I mean, in terms of like, there's many times I've never considered, is it okay if I talk about suicidal
Yeah, I
ideation?
think it's fine.
Okay. So up to having Lyme disease, I had never had experienced suicidal ideation. I had struggled and stuff like that, but it just was something that I never struggled with. And, I would say a couple years into being that sick, I started to say, if I'm this sick in 8 years, I think I'm kind of
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably not, because at that point, my parents would be old. I would be a burden for them. It just
Mhm.
I wouldn't have a lot of chance to survive.
Yeah.
And there's been nights that have just been so hard, either from the typical social fallout. Proximity is key, and I've
Mm.
lost some
Yeah.
relationships. It's
Yeah.
strengthened others, but I've lost some. It's just what happens. Some nights I've had such harsh conversations of being disappointed by lack of support or whatever, and
Mhm.
I've come home and been like, there's a part of me that just wants to drink a bottle of alcohol and find a bottle of pills and just be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's emotionally absolutely by far and by large the most difficult thing I've gone through. I would describe it as demonic, the level of fear, the level of pain, the level of um grief, the
Uncertainty. Yeah.
level of regret. Even though it wasn't my fault that I got sick, I regretted every step of my life. Like, what if I didn't do this and it wouldn't lead me to being sick? It's
Yeah.
Yeah, so tortured psychologically and emotionally. It was a
Right.
torture
Yeah. I think that's a
experience.
perfect word to describe it. It's like
Yeah.
psychological torture. Absolutely. I'm like just hearing about this because you don't get to hear about like the behind the scenes versions of this. Like you see everyone's like they might say, "Oh, like I don't feel well today. I feel sad today. My body's hurting today," but you don't get to see the mental effects behind it. And just to hear
Absolutely.
about it, to talk about it with someone like that is just like it's causing me to like reflect. And I'm just like, I'm so sad that people have to go through these things. Yeah, I feel terrible.
It is so sad. It is.
Yeah.
That's something I thought about when I was sick. I was like, I really think that we have, in terms of where we're strong with the medical system, surgeries, acute injuries, people get in a
Right.
car crash and don't have a good chance of surviving. And we're pretty skilled in those acute areas. But
Yeah.
like when it comes to chronic illness, there's just a gross negligence culture in my experience. It's everyone who I know who's chronically ill, and I've connected with more people from this. I mean, they've experienced extreme negligence from the mainstream medical system.
Right.
Are you still there? I just see an A. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. But yeah,
Um, so I lost my train of
you were talking about like negligence mentality wise of the medical.
right.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking those years that I was sick, God, I wish there was facilities for chronically ill people,
Yeah.
something for us, because if we could
Mhm.
be together in this, there are so many of us, it would feel less. I mean, the amount of terror from being alone, isolated in your room, if we were able to somehow find a way to be in a community or have some sort of program that is designed by the government that has us resting in, I don't know what a solution would be, but the isolation is horrible. And if I feel like a lot of chronically ill people, if we in a magical world where we were all in the same building for
Yeah.
years and supporting each other, it would take away some of the emotional horror of it. It
Yeah.
would take away some of it.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
the isolation and being alone, and is someone gonna discover me dead is just totally
Yeah.
exacerbates all of those negative feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Physically being alone, mentally being alone. Yeah, that's like a topic that's very difficult to deal with. Absolutely. But I think it's really good that social media has like acted well in connecting people because like all these advocation accounts you see, like your account, I discovered you through like going through different chronic illnesses accounts, and like everyone is just so interconnected, and I like it's like a forum for everyone to just spill their thoughts, just talk about what's good, what's not, and just to get feedback from everyone and just feel like they're not alone. I think that is so important. And honestly, it's so I just don't even know a word to describe it. I love that. Yeah.
No, that's so beautiful and it's so true. And the more you lean into that community, it's very scary to come out and talk about
Hmm.
being ill. And for a lot of there's a lot of people who just never talk about it
Yeah,
online, or they keep it private. And I totally understand that decision with the
absolutely.
amount of stigma, the amount of not believing people
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But, I'm also, I always compare, it's weird. I'm gay,
Hmm.
and you can
Oh,
hide from that, or you can lean into it and
yeah.
come out and tell your story. And that's how you connect. And yeah, you're going to deal with there's going to be some societal backlash, but that's how you'll find your people, your community. That's where you'll feel seen. Oh my God,
Yeah.
you've had the same experience as me. And I kind of went through the same thing with chronic illness. When I
Hmm.
first got sick, I was like, I don't want to be a part of the community because I don't want to have this mentality that
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
permanently
This
sick.
label on me, right?
Right. I don't want, and then and as the years went by, I just realized it was a resource. I would
Yeah.
ask people, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And I'm like, these people, this is your team.
Yeah,
This is
they
your team.
understand,
Like,
right?
and they're actually, it's so interesting. Like, I can post in my Lyme group saying like, I'm having this issue. Has anyone had this? What worked? And people have taken upon themselves. I mean, the sense of community. I mean, people will
Yeah.
just ask such specific questions back and give such specific
Yeah.
suggestions, but be careful this way. And when you lean in, it is beautiful, like how much people are willing to help each other and how many of us are there. And we don't need to
Yeah.
feel this shame. And who cares if some people in society don't believe us? The more of us who come out about it and the more of
Yeah.
us who talk about our experiences, the more other people are going to realize, oh, I don't need to be ashamed of this. This is something
Yeah.
I also have.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so I love like when I've had a couple like accounts like follow me, and
Hmm.
I'm always like, that's so cool that there's like,
Yeah.
networks, and it makes you feel so less alone in the world, which is like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think such an important feeling for just life quality. Like you
Absolutely.
can't
Yeah.
feel alone in this
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
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 One of the main things, like why I started this account is like I have this one post where it's like share tips for like if you're feeling ill, if you're not feeling well, any medications, any treatments, how do you deal with fatigue, stuff like that. And when I look at the comments, it's just like so many people are like, I like my arms are hurting. Like, what can I do? And then I see like dozens of comments underneath that telling them. And I just feel like it's just such a beautiful thing. Like people who don't even know each other, who might be on opposite like poles of the world. I think it's so amazing when they like start connecting and like bonding over this. Like, it's not beautiful, obviously, but the connection is so beautiful.
It is. It's radical.
Yeah.
It's like it's it's there's a quote that says, I'm gonna butcher it, but it's something like, let this pain radicalize you rather than leading you to defeat. And I mean that I think that just happens a lot when you're in
Yeah.
pain. You can if you can come radicalized by it when you are treated harshly by society.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just see that in our community. It's just like people really take the initiative to take care of each other and tell each other. A common thing with Lyme disease is you go through die off, and that's when you take antibiotics and you get sicker.
Okay.
As the Lyme is being killed, you get significantly sicker. For
Okay.
some people, including me, it felt like I needed an exorcism. I mean, it was, again, just horrible. And people post in all the time saying, I think I'm dying, blah, blah, blah. And we all comment, it's okay. You're going through die off. We
Yeah.
know what it feels like. We know exactly. And we've been there, and you aren't dying. We promise you this is part of the,
Yeah.
and I just think that, just things like that, as you said, it's just so beautiful. This sense
Yeah.
of a lot of the medical world doesn't help us, so we're going to help each other
Yeah,
as much
right.
as we can.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's an unfortunate thing that leads to beauty, but it is beautiful.
Yeah. So on those lines, for anyone who might be experiencing something similar to you or any other chronic illness for that matter, do you have any like if you could give them one like statement of advice, what would you say that is?
What's the question again?
Like if you
If
could give someone one statement of advice who might be going through similar things as you, what do you think that would be? Yeah, it's a bit of a thinking question.
I know, I'm like, wow, that's like, there's what a loaded question.
Yeah.
I mean,
You could
all I can think of
consolidate.
is
Yeah.
days right now. But I mean, when I was bedbound, I think what I would tell someone if they were in that state, I would
Mhm.
say, I've been there. I know how dark it is and how it feels like there's no tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Please hold on and know that the bravest thing you'll ever do in your life is holding on in this bed.
Right.
And you will never get acknowledged for that. But know that, you know
Yeah,
how
you
much
know that.
suffering.
Yeah.
And everyone who's chronically ill, who's gone through that, knows you're being a hero right now to
Yeah.
yourself. And it sucks that you are not getting the support that other people with chronic illnesses, well, some people get support, some people
Yeah.
don't, but there's a lot of people who don't get acknowledged for their chronic illness. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say to them, this is a time where you have to just really be proud of yourself and not worry about what the world thinks of
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And I always also say, people get complimented when they make it out of a dark place. They are
Yeah.
never complimented when they're in the dark place fighting their way out.
Yeah.
Once they're out, it's like, oh, she's so resilient. She's this amazing person. The most resilient I was when I was day to day just laying in a bed, wondering what was ahead of
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah.
And so I would say, it's heroic to stay. I know how much pain you're in. I know what it's like to not see the light at the end of the tunnel. Stay on. I would tell them about the power of compound interest, which is
Yeah.
an idea
Yeah.
I learned, which is just do tiny, whatever you can do. If you just need to rest, just rest. But if
Mm-hmm.
you get a little bit of energy, there's tiny little things you
Gonna
can
add up.
do. They add up,
Yeah.
and then it allows you to do something even bigger. And then,
Mhm. Yeah.
so I would say all those things. Don't give up. I know what it's like. Do those tiny little things. It happened to me, and it eventually did have a tipping point, and I could
Mhm.
go into this oxygen therapy, and I would just say that. And the other thing I would say is, don't let yourself get defeated by the system,
Yeah.
because the system, it does profit off of, it doesn't profit, but we have a system in which 60,000 people die just recorded from negligence,
Yeah.
medical negligence. I would guess that number is truly in, I would honestly say it's closer to a million, in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
um and I would just say, yeah, kind of
If
fuck
like
the
beat this.
system, beat it, just
Yeah.
stay strong. So it's the toughest thing I ever went through. And
Yeah.
I would just give them a hug and love, like, give them all the love in the world.
Right.
Those are the things I would say.
Right. Yeah. Beat the system, form your own system, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Seek
Yeah.
out other people, find out what other people did, open your mind, and you can use a combination of Western medicine and Eastern medicine, Western and alternative. But yeah, find your own path. And um no one's gonna come and save you. So
You got to
you
do it
gotta
for yourself. Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. That is yeah, that is amazing advice. Yeah, absolutely. So I hope whoever's watching this really like takes that to heart, because I think this is like one of the most like heartfelt conversations I've had. And I really hope that people like obviously take it with a grain of salt, but like,
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah, if anyone ends up listening to this or seeing this, I mean, feel free to even reach out to me on social media.
yeah,
I'm happy to talk to you. I know how dark it can get, and even lesser versions of that. I wouldn't judge someone if they had a lesser version of that, but
yeah,
was still struggling with the pain. Yeah. So I enjoy this conversation too. I'm so like
um,
thankful for people like you who do these things and try to get people connected and try to get the stories out.
mhm,
And I'm so grateful that you call us survivors, because I mean, for me, that really resonates.
yeah,
And I feel sometimes uncomfortable. I wouldn't say it out loud because it's not a term that's been applied to our community.
yeah,
And it really is what we are. So
yeah.
I'm grateful for you and the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I do this too, because just to have these conversations for people to see it is like very gratifying for me. Yeah. So
That makes me very happy.
I hate to end this conversation, but this meeting is over. So
Yeah. It went on a little bit long.
yeah, but yeah. Well, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much for talking with me.